Does everybody know what time it is? Come on, you can do better than that. You're right, here's your host, Dan the Toolman. Thank you, Heidi, and welcome everybody back to Tool Time, brought to you by Binford Tools. Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. They just recently put Home Improvement on Netflix, and me and the boys have been binging it. That was a big thing whenever I was a kid, and now that they're enjoying it, they come every day. I come home from work, Daddy, we want to watch the Tool Man. That gives you that little confidence boost as a father. Yeah, you just might be doing something right, Dad. So guys, seriously, welcome back to Dan's Pro Shop. You guys know me. If you don't, welcome. Today, we are doing a little bit of upgrading on this 2007 Club Car DS. Now, I picked this thing up on a screaming deal. I've been looking at one for a while, but unfortunately, she is bone stock. I mean, not necessarily unfortunately, that's not really a bad thing. That kind of means that this thing is like untouched, It hasn't gone through 600 aftermarket people, and I'm like the 500th owner. This thing was bought brand new by a golf course, used there, maintenance there, which, I mean, there's evidence because there's date marks on the oil filters and the fuel filters and stuff. So honestly, I feel like if you're going to get a used one, this might actually be your best bet because it is as stock as it can be. A lot of hours, yeah, but it's kind of like, it's the way it's supposed to be other than usage. But what I'm getting at today, we're going to be upgrading this thing with like a legit light kit. The kind that you actually like cut out the fenders, put inserts in, bezels, buckets, all that stuff. And it comes with a wiring harness for tail lights and like a switch for the dashboard and everything. So yeah, I think we're going to start doing this. So if you're looking to upgrade your club car, not necessarily this one, but I mean, this kit is made for a DS club car. So if you have like a precedent or something, this may not be the exact procedure, but I guarantee you it'll be darn close. So I don't know. Let's get into this and see what it's all about. Well, here we are with what I believe should be 90% of what we need to do this job. If you guys know me and you're frequent around here, the way a kit comes is rarely ever the way it is. I mean, if you want to, for simplicity's sake, yes, everything you need to do this job is in this kit. All the wiring, all the switches, all the plugs, everything. It is perfectly fine to use just the way it is. But whenever I do things, you kind of want... Yeah, so it's like stock is rarely good enough, but for sake of argument, it works. So don't worry about like the scarcity of this thing. I was just thumbing through the Amazons, and this was one of the kits that were available. Now, naturally, there are ranges in price and quality. There are big fancy kits with like a multi-function switch that goes on the steering column for like turn signals and high and low beam and horns and whatever. I'm not trying to make this thing street legal. I just want forward driving lights and tail lights so we can take this thing to the campground, relatively be safe, and see where you're going. And whenever we go to the races and stuff, it's nice to see and be seen. So not only is this a nice little side project for the weekend, but it's also a safety thing if you want to be that critical. But this kit here, I don't even know a part number. I don't know. Boy, howdy, it's a long number. Don't worry, I will link this exact kit down in the description in case you're interested in doing this exact same thing. But this kit includes a wiring harness with everything that's needed to do this, 2 forward lights. Well, let me grab the one that's open. 2 forward headlight bucket bezel assemblies with a marker light. So if you opted for like the fancier kit that would have turn signals and stuff, this marker light would act as your turn signal. And actually the plug is already kind of wired for that. But for this case, it's just going to act as a marker light. So we're going to have headlights on all the time and a marker light. And as far as the tail lights go, nothing fancy. It's just a red LED light. But these things are also wired in such a way with a 3-wire plug that you can just have them on as a tail or brighter for a brake light. So I don't know, since we're not actually going to be using brake lights, I might just wire these in like the brighter configuration. So if you guys are familiar, this is just a regular standard Molex connector, and you can easily unpin the pins that are in this plug and transpose them, put them in a different location. So I may put like the brighter one in the normal one. I don't know. We got options. And this thing comes with instructions and a layout guide. So let me get back over there and show you what I mean. So what I mean by a layout guide, if you're faint of heart and you're not comfortable with doing this stuff, I don't know, you're gonna kind of have to get comfortable, because this particular kit, in order to get that nice like stock OEM flush it's supposed to be their look, these headlight bezels need to be installed into the factory front end here, which means that we're going to have to cut out holes on all four corners of this thing, 2 in the front for the headlights, 2 in the front for the rear. And that's why that stencil, you know, pattern guide thing comes in the kit. We're going to have to cut that thing out, tape it onto the front of this thing so it gives you a guide of where to cut, what to do. So this guy will fit flush inside of here and look, dare I say, factory. But I don't know, now that we've kind of gone over everything, have a little bit of a parts list, have a general idea of what's going, I guess the next part is to lay this thing out, and then we're going to start cutting this thing apart. Yeah, I know, it's kind of funny. I started this out with saying that this is like a stock, rather unmolested. And yeah, what is the first thing we're doing? Wiring and cutting it apart. So it's like whenever you buy something used from somebody like me, you don't know what you're getting, because everybody and their brother does stuff like this. But hopefully we're going to go about this doing it correctly. We're going to fuse things, have relays for the control circuit so we don't overdraw anything. And yeah, I don't know. We'll dig this pattern thing apart and I'll show you what's up. So digging through the kit here for the pattern, this is what they give you. Unfortunately, they only give you one. The printout here that you're seeing is for the right side or the passenger side. It tells you here on the description that you're going to need to cut this out, and then to do the opposite side, the left or the driver, you simply just take this cutout and flip it 180 degrees so it's a mirror image for the other side. So you're going to have to dig down deep, and remember, home ec class, we're going to do a little bit of arts and crafts here. First thing we got to do is cut this thing out because it gives you body lines to follow, and then the ID of this hole is the part that you actually cut out. So give me a moment here. I'm going to get in touch with my inner feelings and get a little crafty here. We'll cut this thing out. All right, now here we are with our sufficiently cut out pattern. Now, I suggest that you give yourself a little room for error and cut on the inside of the line, like meaning leaving the pattern line on the pattern. Because if you cut your hole a little too small, it's easy to go in there with like a die grinder and make it a little wider if need be. But if you cut it too big, there's no going back. And I don't know. They're cool enough to kind of like give you the body lines to match here. So the next step is we're going to go over to the cart, make sure we got a nice clean surface to begin with. So go ahead and wipe it down in case you've been mud bogging with this thing. And we're going to go ahead and masking tape this thing onto the front and trace her out with a Sharpie. So we might as well start over here on the passenger side, since that's the one that it suggests. And I tell you what, these body lines actually match up pretty darn good. So I'm going to start with trying to line up the corners as best as I can, or maybe the bottom side. I don't know. I'm going to do my best to try to like match up this top ridge in this corner here underneath the logo, and then we'll just kind of go from there. Well, now that we have our pattern installed in what I feel like to be the best position. Now, if you're using this same one, the pattern is a little bit bigger than the body lines here. And I strongly suggest kind of favoring the top, because that'll give us a little more meat down here on the bottom. Because like if you follow this top line exactly, this bottom one gets pretty darn close to the bottom. So I strongly suggest, once you have this thing lined up, take a marker and trace the inside. You don't necessarily want to like do your cutting with this stencil still on here, because if you get a little crazy with your roto zip or your jigsaw or however you decide to do this, and you destroy your pattern, now you're effectively screwed whenever you do the other side. So I strongly suggest we'll go ahead, trace this thing out, and we'll go ahead and do the other side before we cut anything, just kind of eyeball them and see if you like where everything is, kind of if they match, because like now is your chance to adjust this thing if you want to. I really think we should lay them both out and then take a look before we do any cutting. Alrighty, let's go on and do the other one. I'll meet you up when this is all done. Alrighty, now we're all done with our layout, and I mean, it's not 100%, but it's pretty darn good. And like I mentioned, you want to make this a little bit smaller than you need to at first. That way, if you need to zhuzh and like angle a little bit, we'll have a little bit of freedom whenever it comes to actually installing these for good. Because the amount of like hangover on that bezel to where you actually do the mounting, it's pretty generous. Probably got about 3/4 of an inch or so that actually overlaps the ID of this hole. So being insanely critical at this part, like yes, you want to be careful and make them as similar as you possibly can now, but we're going to have a little bit of freedom afterward to, you know, put some wiggle in it. So now we are to the point where the nerve-wracking part comes in. We actually got to cut this thing out. So, you know, there are a million ways to skin a cat. You know, you want to use a rotozip, you want to use a jigsaw, you want to use the sawzall, you know, if you like living dangerously. I don't know. I'm going to go through my inventory here and see what the best option I have for doing this is, and then we'll get to cutting. Alrighty, so my weapon of choice for doing this here little project, I got myself one of these cordless, you know, for the lack of a better term, Dremel. Of course, it's not name brand Dremel, but it is cordless, and it's freaking handy. And I have one of these, like, I don't know if you can really tell what that is. That's like one of those side cutting bits that you would traditionally use for something like in a rotozip for drywall or whatever, but this one's a little more meaty, so it would be, you know, appropriate for fiberglass or plastic or whatever the heck this stuff is. I think it's going to work out just fine. Now, if you have one of those like router attachments that go on the end of this thing, that would probably greatly improve your experience, but Lord knows where that thing is. Either way, we're just going to go for it and be careful. And if you're interested in this little thing, I will drop a link down in the description. It comes with all these bits and stuff as part of the kit, but this is a handy little SOB. But I don't know. Cross your fingers. Wish me luck. We're going to start the cutting. Man, that worked out freaking awesome. I think that this tool is the tool to do this. Now, I know you probably couldn't see / hear or whatever the majority of this, but I'll get you in a little bit better on the second one so you can see better what's going on. Pretty freaking good, and I feel like this was the tool for the job. And you know, like I mentioned, you can do whatever you want, but wow, this worked out freaking fantastic. Now I suppose I'm gonna get in here a little bit, clean this up, and we'll try for fitment. But like I said, don't fret. We made these a little bit small on purpose, so if we need to go in there and do a little bit of zhuzhing, We got more than enough room. So let me clean these things up. I'll meet you back here in a minute. Man, another perfect tool for the job. This little 20-degree angle deburring and a 90-degree angle die grinder, whatever this thing's called. That worked out freaking awesome. And this is going to be perfect for doing a little bit of zhuzhing here and there when we need to. What's the next logical step here is to take one of these lights and see how well they fit. I put this guy in here. Oh, that would help if I get the right one. Here we go. Here's a passenger side light. Put this guy in here. Maybe a little bit of cleanup on this bottom hand corner here, but I tell you what, that is darn close. Let me do a little zhuzhing down here in this edge right here to try to get that to go in there a little bit better. And we'll just keep rocking with it. But this is why I said make it a little bit small, because if this was too big, you're screwed. There's no putting it back once it's gone. So let me do a little bit of buffing down here. We'll keep on going. I tell you what, brother, that's not 100% perfect, but it is pretty darn good. Once we get the screws in there to retain this thing for good, I think this is going to be the ticket. I'm going to go ahead and check the other side. Oh, man. This one's about perfect right out of the gate. Must have learned my lesson over there. Now, I don't know, maybe a little bit of polish in here, but I'll go ahead and get everything fit up real good, and we'll go in and start actually installing. Now, when it comes to actually installing these things in the careful holes that we just cut out, it does supply hardware in the kit. However, I'm not crazy about it. They're kind of just like glorified drywall screws. I feel like there's a better way to do this, and actually I'm going to include a couple more holes around the outer diameter of this thing just to make me feel better. But let me explain to you what I mean. Now, there is such a thing as plastic screws. Now, I don't mean that they're made of plastic. I mean that they are meant specifically to fasten into polymer materials. Now, these things, I know it's going to be difficult to see, but they do not have a tip. They are blunted. These things are meant to go into a through hole and simply fasten. Now, where did I get these? I don't know. They've been in this bin forever, but for circumstances like this, they are bloody nice to have. So I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of pre-drilling. Now, keep in mind, this is not part of the original kit. You do not need to do this. However, I did warn you at the beginning of this that I rarely ever leave anything the way that it's supposed to be. If I see a function or a procedure or something that I feel like I could better that thing, I'm going to do it. So feel free to ignore this next part, but if you'd like to, I will do my best to find a link for these appropriate screws, put them down in the description. If you want to do this, I strongly suggest. It can't hurt to over fasten these things. Now, for these particular screws, we only want these to dig in and bite into the body panel on the cart. We do not necessarily want the threads to engage with the bezel here, because that would be kind of defeating the purpose. So we're going to need to add some through holes in the locations where I want to add hardware. That way the screws slip right through the bezel and then dig into the pre-drill that we are then going to install into the cart. Now, it says in the instructions, I believe, with the hardware that they included, to put like a 332 pre-drill or something like that. I don't know. But I'm going to go ahead and measure these and make my own assertion as to what the pre-drill should be for these, because believe me, you need to pre-drill these. You cannot just set them. Number one, these screws are not meant to be self-drilling. Number two, you take a solid chance of cracking the plastic on your cart. So you don't want that to happen. But either way, I'm going to add a couple more screws around the perimeter of this thing, you know, just to make me feel better about what's happening here. And then we'll go over there, mark some holes, do a little bit of pre-drilling. Hey, Dan, did you measure or plan out any of these holes? Nope. I'm just kind of putting them where I feel like they'd be necessary. So like I mentioned, this is user beware kind of thing. Do this only if you want to. All right. I think that's going to work out fine, and honestly, it'll make me feel a lot better about it. But we're going to go ahead and line these things up into the hole in the front of the cart, and then take that same Sharpie there, do a little bit of marking, and then we'll get to pre-drilling. Now, whenever you go to put this thing in here, make sure that you have it pressed in all of the way to where you're going to want it, because they do have a little bit of give. I mean, they're new, they are a formed plastic part, and it's not going to be absolutely perfect. So go ahead and make sure everything is pressed in all the way to exactly where you're going to want it. And then mark your holes. All right. Feel like that's going to work out fine and dandy. So now, if you'd give me a minute, I got to go figure out an appropriate pre-drill for this thing. And then we can actually get this side installed. Don't worry, we'll do the same thing over there. So the through hole I used was a 3/16. Let's go ahead and go a couple sizes smaller than that. 1/8 inch seems to be a bit much. That would give us a lot of dig in there though. Maybe 9/64. We'll try that. Make sure that is what it is. Well, that's in the wrong place. That's nice. So that's why you always check the size of your bit. 9/64. I think that's going to be the ticket for the pre-drill. Yep, we're going to go with that. Now, those ones underneath are a lot of the ones that I added because the factory bezel has no screws underneath. And I don't know, I might even put some up top. Honestly, I might put some weather stripping on these things. I don't know. Clearly, there's no fender well in the front of these things, so they're going to get blasted if you're driving in the rain anyway. But I don't know. Let's fit it up. There we go. Go ahead and start on one side, and we'll work our way over. That's freaking brilliant. That worked out perfect. I'm really glad I added those extra screws. If nothing else, it'll just make me feel better. I don't know. I like it. Let's go ahead and do the other one. All right. And this thing's starting to look legit already. I mean, yeah, for a cheapo little kit from Amazon, I tell you what, it's not bad. You take your time, do a little diligence, make sure you mark everything out. Man, I'm excited to spark these things up. But however, we got tail lights. We got to do this exact same procedure on the rear end of this thing and get the tail lights in there. But those ones should be significantly more simple because they're flat. It's not going around the corner. We don't have to match any contours or anything. So, I don't know, give me a minute. You don't need to see the process again. It's the same thing. Let me get those things hooked up. Meet you right back here. And just like that, with a little bit of movie magic, we got our tail lights. I'm telling you, brother, if you went ahead and did the headlights first and struggled through that and got all the corners and contours and all that pattern stuff done, this is a breeze because these things are perfectly flat. The pattern that comes for the back one, I don't necessarily know if it's side to side because these things look pretty symmetrical, but honestly, even the hole that you cut out, they give you a little bit of leeway on that. So the way I went around it is I cut the hole out, put the top screw in first, then stand back and take a look at it. And then you can kind of wiggle left to right to get that perfectly vertical, parallel between the two. But either way, that was super easy. So arguably the hard part is done. We're done cutting, we're done installing. Now we need to install the wiring harness that comes with this thing. And there's really only one more hole to drill for the switch. But like I mentioned, I have a different switch cluster for this. So just for sake of argument, I'm going to put together the factory one that comes in the kit. So it will be using it the way that it comes, but I'm not going to install the switch. I'm just going to leave the switch out so it functions the way that it's supposed to in the kit, because I'm going to install that other switch panel later, but I'm going to make that a different video because I don't want to make this one 17 hours long. Not to mention, I'm going to do a little bit more than that, like put in some heavy gauge wire and put a relay that's switched to the key, so that way there's no way that if you turn the key off and take it with you, it will kill the control circuit. So there's no accidentally leaving the lights on, which I mean, with this you can do. But either way, don't worry about my modifications. Let's go ahead and install the kit the way that it's supposed to be, minus actually putting the switch in. So I'm going to be totally honest with you, or 100 as the kids say these days. I haven't even opened this thing yet, so I really don't even know what's happening with this harness. But there's the little switch that they want you to put in the dashboard, which is fine and dandy. You can do that, but we're not gonna. And then there's a nice loomed harness. But I don't know. I'm not crazy about the gauge of this wire. It probably looks to be like 14 or 16. I don't know. Let's see if it says on here somewhere. 18 gauge. Now, keep in mind, these are LED lights, and there's not that much of a draw on it. However, I am an overbuild Tim Taylor kind of guy. So my plan was to run some 10 gauge up to the dashboard to that control relay, and then we tap in from there. But like I mentioned, we're just kind of going to do this for now, just for a function test, so I can get an idea of what's going on. But I mean, I really do like the fact that this is all loomed up. I don't know, this is super clean. It's got the factory plugs. We may utilize this just for the lighting circuit, but then my control relay, I'm going to use the big power for. But, I don't know. Let's get to fishing this thing through where it's supposed to be. Alrighty, so after some investigation on this, it's honestly not too bad. So, everything is already laid out and kind of cut to length for what you need. So, these three up here, we have one that's just a bunch of plugs. This is going to be for your switch in the dashboard. We're going to have a positive, and like a supply in, a supply out, and a ground, because the switch is illuminated. So we need to ground the switch so we have a light on the switch. And then we have a white and a red plug that will go to our left and right headlights up here. About 3/4 of the way down, we have a little jump out with a fuse that goes to your battery. And on the back, we have two different lengths here. One's about 2.5 feet, one's about 3 feet, that goes to either tail light. And that's fine and dandy. Now we're just going to have to get creative on how you want to run this. I'm not going to tell you how to do you. This is a totally user-friendly thing. It doesn't even tell you, like in the instructions, how you should do it. You just need to get creative. But with these club cars specifically, it is like a C-channel or an I-beam aluminum frame. So I'm just going to go along the frame as much as I can, zip tie every 6-8 inches, just make sure everything's up nice and tight, away from all your pedal components underneath the floor, away from all your steering components up front, away from like brake lines or whatever's going on in the back here. Just make sure everything's out of the way and it's not going to get damaged or caught up in where it's at. So give me a moment, relax here, and I'm going to get this strung as best I can. And when I come back, it'll be time for a function test.
One eternity later.
Well, guys, whew, with a lot of cussing and a little bit of luck, we got this wire and harness done. Now, like I mentioned before all this, I mean, well, hey, movie magic, you guys saw this pretty much instantaneously, but I kid you not, that was at least an hour, hour and a half of MF in this thing, getting it the way that I wanted. Because, like, if you want to do it, dare I say, correctly and follow, like, the OE harness, there's particular holes to the frame, and, like, the way that it gets routed up here behind the dashboard, behind the intake plenum for the engine, and get it up into the dashboard in the same factory location, it is a bear to do without completely disassembling this thing. Like those Molex plugs that I showed you that go into the headlights up front, I ended up depinning them to allow me room, like have egress to go into certain places where you wouldn't have been able to fit if the plug was still on it. And back here, I just kind of routed it back around the frame, but you got to be careful on the rear because that's where the muffler is. So like you don't want anything to get close enough to where it's going to be a problem with heat. And either way, like I said, this process is entirely up to you. I'm not going to go in depth and show you how I did it because it's up to you how you choose to do it. There are definitely easier ways. I did what I felt to be the correct way. And like I mentioned, I just kind of have this thing rigged up right now with the switch that came with the kit. The only thing that we're not doing is actually drilling and mounting the switch into the dashboard. I'll show you where it's supposed to go. But right now, I just have the wires hanging out of the front with the switch connected so you can see how it's supposed to be. I'm going to do that other switch panel thing, which will be a different video. But yeah, After a lot of rolling around on the floor and twisting up like a pretzel with 17 elbows, I think we're good to go. So let me show you what's up. This dash panel right here in the middle that goes around the steering column is removable. Well, dare I say removable. It's a bear to take out because of the way the key switch is, but it can be removed minus, it's wrapped around the steering column. So if you want to take it completely out, you're going to have to remove the wheel. I ain't going through all that trouble. What we did here is this is the part of the harness that comes in the kit that goes to the factory switch, the one that it comes with. And on the side of this thing, I know you're not going to be able to see it, but there is a wee little dimple in this plate. That is like the factory mark from Club Car, that if this thing would have come with headlights, this is where that switch would have been originally located. Like that's the drill location for the switch. So if you want to use this one that comes in the kit, it already has like a 1/2 inch KO hole here. So this would get mounted right about like right where that thing is. And then all your extra wiring would go back here behind the dashboard. But this thing here where the sticker is, I found a switch panel that's almost exactly this same size with 2 auxiliary switches, 2 USB chargers, and a voltmeter. So I don't know about you, but I like that way better than what this is. But if all you're looking for is lights, this is fine. But yeah, now let's see how it actually works. Switch on. There we go. Check that out, guys. We got tail, we got headlights, and yeah, actually, I don't know if you remember earlier on in this, I mentioned that these guys had like tail and brake. Well, since this kit doesn't like have an actual brake switch, the way that these are wired is that it's hot on both the tail and the brake going to this plug. So you have both of them on so that it's in its brighter state. This is just the way that they are. But the way that the harness is constructed, if you choose to down the line add a brake switch or maybe even turn these into turn signals, it's already available to do that. You'll just have to tap into the harness and then change the wire that controls the brighter setting of these. So I don't know, maybe that's a down the line thing, but yeah, I'm not driving this down the road. This is for campground, just for to see and be seen, that kind of stuff. Well, let's check out the front. Get this thing in neutral. Oh, yes. There you go. Let the brakes off. That'll help. Oh, that's why I was running over my light. Don't worry, just $300 Snap-on light, whatever. All right, now we're back here to hopefully where you can see all this. Turn on the supposed to be factory switch. There we go. And this is a very similar thing up here in the front. So these don't necessarily have high and low beam, at least I don't think so. Anyway, they might, I don't know, but I mean, they're pretty decently bright for what they are and for the price of this kit. But these marker lights here on the side are the same thing as the tail lights in the rear. If you wish to, wanted to, or had the ability with whatever comes in the kit, these can also be turn signals instead of just marker lights. So very similar thing. You can dig into the harness, do whatever you want to do with the wiring. But the way that this one is just flip the switch, everything comes on. And I think for what we're trying to go for, this works out freaking awesome. Well, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this little side project. And don't get me wrong, if you're trying to do this on your own, set aside a Saturday. Because, I mean, there is a lot involved in this. It's not that big of a deal, but this is a pretty decent project. And, like, I don't know, maybe if you're new to this stuff or you don't do stuff like this often, it can be time consuming. Not to mention, you got to have the grit to cut holes in your cart and like have the confidence in that you're not gonna screw it up, because like, man, if you mess this up, you got to buy this whole nose cone thing here, and Lord knows how expensive those are. The whole point of this build was try to be minimalistic, get what I need for the least amount invested. But I'm super stoked about this. Now we have lights, and once ever I get that other switch panel, we're gonna do it up a little bit better, maybe even put some auxiliary driving lights up here, really light up the road or whatever the heck we're getting into. But it has an extra switch, so by golly, I'm going to use it. But yeah, that's it, guys. It's just plug it in, drill some holes, do the thing. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and stay tuned for a whole lot more crap coming for this thing. Keep the shiny side up, and we'll see you next time.